Welcome to Islam for Dummies. Today, we will be talking about the Islamic punishment for adultery, or stoning. Is it barbaric, as some people claim? Quite the contrary. We will see the mercy of Islam as the divine culmination of Judaism and Christianity. First, Islam alleviated mankind from this most severe punishment for nearly all crimes. Throughout ancient history, humanity was predominantly violent and unruly. Harsh measures were needed to deter evil acts, and advanced means were not yet developed for effective policing, detention, and rehabilitation. However, this does not justify the barbaric laws and practices of all ancient non-religious societies. And while Islam confirms the divine origin of the Old Testament, it is impossible to know for certain which of its punishments were indeed ordained by God, invented by the rabbis, or altered by the scribes. In the Old Testament, stoning was prescribed for many infractions such as committing adultery, fornication, worshipping other gods, inviting people to worship other gods, blaspheming, witchcraft, touching a mountain, breaking the Sabbath, disobeying your parents, and last but not least, not screaming loud enough while being raped. Islam lifted the burden of this most severe punishment for all crimes, except one: committing adultery, because of the devastating impact of marital infidelity on the very fabric of society. And regarding fornication by unmarried people, Islam reduced the punishment to 100 lashes. Second, regarding the verse of stoning, God mercifully lifted its recitation and text from the Qur'an, while the legislation remained. To paraphrase Imam al-Suyuti from his book, El-Itqan, this verse was abrogated, while its application remained, to alleviate the nation, because it is the heaviest burden and the toughest, and the most severe punishment. Third, Islam's requirements regarding witnesses are so stringent that it is nearly impossible to obtain a conviction for adultery. For example, convicting someone in court of adultery requires 4 eyewitnesses of good character who saw the penetration of one sexual member into another. Not only is it very unlikely to find 4 men of good character who watched such an act together, but if less than 4 witnesses are produced, the witnesses themselves will be punished for the crime of slander. As a result, enforcing any punishment for extramarital sex is nearly impossible in Islam. In fact, throughout all early Islamic leaderships, there was not even one single case where 4 people testified to witnessing adultery. And as for those who knew the punishment and confessed anyway, this was confirmed by the Prophet as the supreme repentance, worth that of an entire city. Therefore, as a punishment, stoning is not scary at all, because it can hardly ever be enforced. It is an effective deterrent, not out of fear, but because no Muslim would want to commit an act that, in the sight of God, deserves such a punishment. Fourth, this punishment applies only to Muslims who are not the ones complaining about it. Islam does not interfere with non-Muslims about the standards they set regarding adultery. Therefore, attacking Islam's stance on adultery is like trying to force Muslims to adopt the moral values or religious beliefs of others. And as for those who will still claim that the punishment against Muslims who commit adultery is too severe, we will now discuss the top 3 ways to avoid being stoned for adultery. Number 3. Be faithful to your spouse. Number 2. Do not confess to adultery 4 times. And number 1. Do not let 4 men of good character witness your act of adultery simultaneously in a well-lit room and from specific angles. In conclusion, the only people who can easily be punished by stoning against their will are those who commit adultery in public places. And as for those who attack Islam on this issue, at least we know their stance on the importance of spousal commitments and public displays of adultery. We sincerely hope you enjoyed this episode of Islam for Dummies.